case you didn't know, today is a special edition of Adult Sunday School. It's today only. We're not having the next one until the first Sunday after Labor Day. I wanted to give you an update on General Convention. I've got a little bit to share with you here. Seriously, this much I'm going to hand out later. And this much I'm going to use as notes. And then if we have, what I'd like to do is just kind of run right through with a summary. And some topics you will definitely want to talk more about, and we can go into depth. Okay. So what is General Convention? In case anybody doesn't know, General Convention is the highest, is the highest authority in the Episcopal Church, but it meets for 2 weeks every 3 years. So there's 2 years and 50 weeks when we don't have the highest authority meeting. It's set up a lot like the U.S. Congress, but it's much more friendly and functional. And it was set up by some of the same people who wrote the Constitution in the very same year. That is, there are two houses. It's bicameral. There's a House of Deputies, and those are priests, deacons, and lay people who are elected by their dioceses, 4 clergy, 4 lay. And then there's the House of Bishops. And obviously that's all of the bishops, and some things only the diocesan bishops can vote on, and the retired bishops can't. But both houses have to pass legislation with exactly the same language, just like Congress. So there's a big division of powers there, and that idea, again, came at the beginning of our country's political system. So that was a common idea in this country at the time. And also, just like England had kings who were tyrants, the Church of England had some archbishops who were tyrants. And they just wanted to divide that authority, but also recognize the authority of lay people. I mean, we are all in the baptismal covenant together, and this is the basic and shared covenant. Being a deacon or a priest or a bishop doesn't make somebody higher or outranking. The baptismal covenant is fundamental there. And then the ordination is setting aside for some special things for which people will need a little extra help from the Holy Spirit. This year, it was in Austin, Texas, which was just as warm as Salt Lake City 3 years ago, and Indianapolis 3 years before that. I would really like for them to meet in Winnipeg or Fairbanks, perhaps. That would be good, but no. One of the youth asked me 3 years ago, so in a sentence, what is General Convention? And I said, okay, General Convention is a way for 1,300 people to make 1,000 decisions over the course of 10 days in a way that everybody agrees is fair. It's a miracle I could put that in a sentence. So there's a lot I didn't put in that sentence. But it does some specific things. Some of it is just governance. What do the canons say? Are we going to pay the president of the House of Deputies? What exactly should be in the budget? Where's that money coming from? Just governance things. A lot of it has to do with social justice. There were quite a few resolutions on the problems in Israel and West Bank and Gaza. Some of it has to do with discipline. Now, we generally think of discipline as you do something bad and you get disciplined, but there's another sense in that, which is kind of how we order our common life, and it includes questions about whom we ordain. The next level up is doctrine, and then the 3 doctrine that we know to be true, and if they're not true, we can't participate in salvation. Those are doctrine. So we're dealing with a lot of these things at General Convention at the level of discipline, like who gets married. who gets ordained. But then we also make doctrine. And everything, by the way, everything in the prayer book is doctrine. Everything in that blue hymnal, everything in the blue hymnals is also doctrine, because General Convention has passed those. In fact, if you want to change the prayer book, it takes 3 General Conventions. So once you get started, it's going to be 12 years away at the soonest. But we'll talk more about that. So presiding bishop, Michael Curry, who thankfully preached and talked a whole lot there, called this convention, to follow the way of Jesus. And that's also a document that I'm going to pass out later. So we passed a $134 million budget, and that's for 3 years. That's a lot of money, more than $30 million a year. It reflects 3 more years of presiding bishop's priorities, which are evangelism, racial reconciliation, and creation care. Legislative sessions. I like the way Episcopal News Service puts this. We're overseen by a resident group of avian observers. In other words, this big convention hall had pigeons, and we'd be doing something just really gravely serious, and 2 pigeons would just come like, make a beautiful arc in front of everybody, like having an audience. And then they'd land certain places, and there were these, there were 6 kiosks where people could go and be on microphone and speak, and a bright light would come on. Every once in a while, a pigeon would land there. The producer was smart enough to have a cameraman hit that preset focus and turn on the lights, and that would just appear on the screen. And one time, the president of the House of Deputies said, would the deputy pigeon at microphone 6 like to speak to this? So we have some fun once in a while. And the nice thing is, the president of the House of Deputies, A. Clark Jennings, who was a priest, has a really excellent wit. So again, we're in this serious stuff, and she'll come up with something pretty funny. Outside of legislative chambers, quite a few events brought together bishops, deputies, visitors to mingle, socialize, pray, to advocate as a public witness, the Bishops Against Gun Violence. And mind you, our bishop told me we're not bishops against guns, we're bishops against gun violence. Had a large demonstration, and I'll tell you a little more about the demonstration that I was part of at a detention center outside of Austin. There was a revival service. Presiding Bishop Curry had a really great sermon. Of course, all of his sermons are great. I've never heard a bad sermon. Saying about how God is love and gives life. Now, this was a handy thing, because the first Monday of convention, you know, we're all walking around downtown Austin, the clergy had their collars on, and I went to Patagonia to get some swim trunks. And the 2 ladies behind the counter asked me what my convention was about. And I said, well, it's the General Convention of the Episcopal Church. And typically when I say Episcopal Church, I get a blank stare. And thankfully, almost nobody asked me how to spell it. But I said, did you see the royal wedding? Yes. Do you remember the preacher? Oh, yeah, he was great. Well, that's the presiding bishop of the Episcopal Church. In fact, I heard him preach just this morning. Oh, really? He's in Austin? Yeah, he's in downtown Austin. And there's this big event at the Palmer Center on Saturday night. And you can go hear him preach live. Oh, great. Oh, darn, I have to work. But the other one said she was going to go. Several thousand people there. I didn't see either of these ladies. But then I spoke with the presiding bishop at a reception, I think on Wednesday. And I said, you know, preaching at that royal wedding has been so helpful in my ministry. Again, like that. And I said, usually when I say Episcopal Church, I get a blank stare. But now I can say royal wedding preacher, and they go, oh yeah! Very useful. he thought that was pretty funny. And he made a joke about people asking how to spell that, and I said, yeah, that's why I left the Presbyterian Church, because I couldn't even spell it. Here is a quote about that $134 million budget. It's from the Bishop of Maine. The foundation of our continuing ministries as a church and our commitment to others both within and beyond the church. That's how he sees this big budget. The foundation of our continuing ministries, come on in, as a church and our commitments to others, both within and beyond our church. He also mentioned something about the church's ongoing commitment to conciliar governance. That is, we don't have anybody just issuing orders. It's conciliar governance. We're governed by councils. General Convention is really just a big council, or a couple of big councils that have to agree with one another. This diocese is governed by councils. There is the diocesan council, which is a lot like a vestry, but it's for the diocese and the diocesan budget. And then there's also a standing committee that makes sure all of the canons are complied with. It has some other duties, but it's, again, that idea that councils govern, or we have incorporated division of powers. One of the big things, and I know we'll want to talk about this, we'll get into it later, had to do with trial use marriage rights. I was kind of expecting the trial use to become official. It did not. These two rights are still for trial use, but the church did commit to continuing to provide them. And I did not know that these are rights for, I thought these were rights just for same-sex couples who are getting married. It turns out anybody can use these rights. So if you look them up online, or if you want me to put a link in the newsletter, let me know, and you can read them for yourself. Not that anybody here, I don't know, is planning to get married, but those rights are for everybody. Also, there was one change concerning this. It used to be that a bishop could say, well, we're not having this in my diocese. But people could go to another diocese where there was a bishop who would permit it. And now the 9 bishops who said, we're not going to have this in our diocese, actually agreed. They all agreed in the House of Bishops that the decision, come on in, the decision about whether to marry someone, how to marry a couple, will be left with the rector or priest in charge of the congregation. So it takes the bishop out of the decision-making process and puts the priest in charge in that decision-making, which is at the parish level, which is where it had always been before we started with same-sex marriages or blessing of unions. But that was novel, and so the bishops kind of slowly loosened control. Now, it does provide that if a bishop holds a theological position that does not embrace marriage for same-sex couples, he or she may invite another bishop if necessary to provide pastoral support to any couple desiring to use the rights, as well as to the clergy member and congregation involved. So a bishop still has that option. It's called DEPO, Delegated Episcopal Oversight, but it's not a matter of sending a couple and a priest to another diocese, but rather, if they need a bishop, and I've never needed a bishop to help me with run a wedding, then the other bishop may come in and we can talk by phone.
In what case would you need to have a bishop come in?
Well, now there is a case of divorce. If one or both members of the couple is divorced, then the bishop does have to give approval.
Oh.
And that's the only time I've ever involved a bishop. And in fact, our current and former bishop said, if there's only been one divorce, I don't want to hear about it. So if there have been 2 or more divorces, then we'll get the bishop's permission.
Gotcha, that's what I
There was someone in my former congregation getting married for the 5th time, and the couple did have to go and talk with the bishop. And they did end up getting married, and looks like they've had a great marriage for quite a few years. Prayer book revision.
No, one quick question before prayer book revision. Was the matter settled as to whether one of those 9 bishops could prohibit all of their clergy from participating in any same-sex marriage?
That was
Was that
settled.
issue resolved?
That was resolved, and they may not.
They may not prohibit it.
They may not prohibit.
Okay, thank you. I couldn't.
And what I just said here, if the bishop holds a theological position that does not embrace marriage for same-sex couples, he or she may invite another bishop if necessary to help or provide pastoral support. So if I was in one of those dioceses, and I had a couple, one member of which had been divorced a couple of times, I might be talking to the Bishop of Kansas instead of the Bishop of Westminster. And we could probably do that by letters and phone calls. Dave?
I probably can't answer this, but I just have to ask. In the 70s, my aunt had been widowed 3 times, and she was getting married in the Episcopal Church. She had been an ongoing member, married previous. She was denied being married in the Episcopal Church, and she wasn't divorced. She was never divorced. She was always being widowed. I had to do that for her.
That was out of order and should have been reported to a bishop.
Okay, I was wondering, so. I don't know.
Frankly, it's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely out of order. So, if you saw my Facebook page, I had a picture of a vote up on a big screen, and I said, and we are off towards a new prayer book. Okay, bring your anxiety level down, we are not. This began in the House of Deputies with a resolution for prayer book revision, and the House of Deputies passed that. And so it went to the House of Bishops, and they said, oh no. And what they decided was, we're going to keep the 1979 Book of Common Prayer. We're going to keep it for as long as anybody can foresee. Even if somebody did want to make changes to it, or revise it, or bring together a new prayer book, they'd have to start at the next General Convention in 3 years. It takes 3 conventions to approve prayer book revisions, so that's no less than 15 years from now, if there was a movement to do that. But the movement right now is to do something different. Some of the prayer book does need refreshing, and there are some communities in the church that need their own liturgies, and all are encouraged to use their own liturgies. You can talk with the bishop, but then report to the Standing Commission on Liturgy and Music. How did this work out for you? So Eucharistic prayers A, B, and D have actually been given that refreshment. Now we're going to keep using the ones in the Book of Common Prayer, but if we wanted to use some of these others, they exist as PDF files, and so we just put them into our own bulletin. And they will probably always exist as PDF files. Likewise, the 2 rites for marriage, those will probably always be PDF files. So some of the new liturgies, Quinceañera, Dios de los Muertos, and the Feast of the Virgin of Guadalupe, those are all new, and those were adopted for trial use. Again, they're probably always going to exist as PDF files. All of the other things coming, whether new liturgies or refreshing old liturgies, are probably going to remain PDF files, which is kind of like what a former presiding bishop told me 9 years ago, Bishop Catherine Jeffords Story. I was at a provincial meeting, and I was sitting on the front row, and she, in her speech, mentioned something about prayer book, a new prayer book. And so, my ears popped up. And afterwards, when she was taking questions, I said, what might a new prayer book look like? And she walked right up to me, picked up the iPad of the person sitting next to me and said, well, it might look very much like this. So I then had supper with my former liturgy professor, and I told him this, and he got mad, and he said, the arrogance of that, because he came from a small parish in southern Ohio that could not afford prayer books, and they were given used prayer books to use. How many parishes can afford iPads instead of prayer books? Right, you can't. So we're going to print bulletins in waste paper, or we're going to put things on a screen. Anyhow, that's how that is going to work. So what the bishop suggested is a plan for liturgical and prayer book revision for the future of God's mission through the Episcopal branch of the Jesus Movement. And then here's the right language for what I was trying to say about experimenting and coming up with your own liturgies. The bishop's resolution calls for bishops to engage worshiping communities in their dioceses in experimentation and creation of alternative liturgical texts that they will submit to the task force and the Standing Commission on Liturgy and Music. This was kind of a hot topic on Facebook conversations, at least. Didn't seem to be such a hot topic at convention. And that is, liturgical revision will utilize inclusive and expansive language and imagery for humanity and divinity, and will incorporate understanding, appreciation, and care of God's creation. Now you hear about inclusive and expansive language, and you think, well, how are we going to change all the pronouns in the Psalms? How are we just going to get rid of pronouns in the whole Book of Common Prayer? Well, Jesus was male, so feel free to use the male pronoun. But I don't know if you have noticed, but in every single sermon and everything that I have written, I have used gender-neutral pronouns, or I have avoided the pronouns. I bet you didn't even notice. That's every single sermon and publication. I had to start doing that in 2001 in seminary. It took about a year to get the hang of it, but there it is. It can be done gracefully, most definitely. I can talk a little more about language later if you would like. There was some action on immigration. I don't think anybody at convention would say that we should just have open borders. I never heard that phrase or anything like it. They did talk about the injustice of separating children from their parents, of detaining children, of detaining and prosecuting every single case of illegal entry, which is a misdemeanor and not a felony, thus filling up these detention centers. And in addition to resolutions just saying we advocate for this or that, 1,000 Episcopalians gathered in Hutto, Texas, in a baseball field next to the Hutto Immigrant Detention Facility. And inside were many women, just women in this facility. And it looked like a big two-story jail. It had the barbed wire fence, the concertina wire on top, and all that. And guards and sheriff's deputies outside, just to make sure we didn't slightly step on the wrong side of the property line so that we could be arrested. In fact, I was threatened with arrest. I wanted to get a picture of everything, so I stood up, I climbed up to the railroad track and took a picture, and the sheriff's deputy came along in his car. Do not approach the railroad tracks. That is private property. You are subject to arrest. Okay, I screwed him. Wanted to stay in my nice, luxurious, well-air-conditioned hotel room that night and not the Hutto County Jail. So what did we do? Well, we did some praying, and then most of us left the baseball diamond, walked down the side of the road, and just stretched out for several hundred yards in front of this facility. And we could see hands going up on the windows, couldn't make out faces. One window opened and somebody had a piece of white paper and was waving it at us. And then one of the clergy who was part of this knew one of the women inside and had a cell phone call from her. So this isn't a penitentiary where you don't get cell phones, it's a detention center, and they have cell phones. Who said the women inside were glued to the windows and they were overwhelmed and many were crying just to know that there were people outside who cared. And that's what we did. We waved at them. I went like this at them a few times because I get to do that too. It's a special way of waving, isn't it? And then we sang some songs, and the woman inside also reported to this priest that they heard us. And it was very moving and very calm until the presiding bishop started preaching. So then we walked back to the baseball diamond, and Megan Castellan, a priest, still licensed in this diocese, no longer resident in this diocese, had organized this whole thing. So she was there with the rector of St. Paul's on Main Street, Stan Runnels. And Stan takes a flag wherever he goes. And he took the Episcopal flag. So he was standing there, President of the House of Deputies, presiding bishop, and Megan Castellan. And the presiding bishop started to preach. And I was about 20 feet away. You can see this on my Facebook page. And then also in this week's newsletter, I'll give you something to click on to get a much better video recording than I made. What I saw on my Facebook page, it was like standing 20 feet from Martin Luther King. Because he wasn't just talking about God. He was talking about what this country was founded to be and what the Statue of Liberty means. And the words at the base of the Statue of Liberty about welcome and inclusion. And then, of course, he shifts over to God. It's all about love. Are we behaving in a loving way towards these people? They are people. One of those few times I just kind of burst out with a little giggle I couldn't suppress. I was just so moved. So very moved. There were lots and lots of resolutions about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. We ended up passing, I think, just a couple. And I have a little more insight than I used to have. My last trip to Israel in 2003, during the Intifada, I went to St. George's University, an Anglican college in Jerusalem, and they took us to the West Bank. And I went into private homes in the West Bank and talked with Palestinians. By the way, they were Christian. Christians in the West Bank, and Israel and Palestine, are Palestinian. Though there are some Christians of kind of a different program in Israel. So I kind of realized, yeah, the Israeli government has been seriously misbehaving towards these people, because I'd actually seen that already. Taking land, building walls around land, plowing up, tearing down, plowing up olive groves that had been in Palestinian families for generations, maybe centuries, restricting water, never issuing a building permit for East Jerusalem so that it looks like the worst visions of the inner city from the 1970s, because people can't paint the outside of their buildings or replace broken windows without one of these permits. And what they can get quite readily from the Israeli government is a visa to leave. So I'm very pro-Israel. Israel is one of 3 countries I'd be willing to go fight for. The others being the UK and obviously the US. But they really have misbehaved towards these people. Every one of these resolutions affirmed Israel's right to exist and to defend itself. That was always there. But they also called them out on some problems. 2 more things. There is something called a human rights investment screen. It's also called socially aware investing. Our investment committee and our vestry actually adopted that screening when we had our money with a commercial broker. Now, most of our investments are with the DFMS Trust Fund, which is where much of the Episcopal Church puts their money, several $100 million from our diocese, other dioceses, old scholarship funds from like 1850, and they have that social investment screen. And there is advocacy that include a human rights investment screen. And that was just encouraging the church pension fund to use this for their investments. Now there's a whole other pool of money, hundreds of millions of dollars in the pension fund. I had a luncheon sponsored by the Church Pension Group. If you ever go to a convention, go to everything the Church Pension Group puts on, because they buy the best food and booze and the best hotels. And there are 2 free meals that don't come out of your per diem. They had 2 investment advisors whom they had hired, and then one lady who is, forgot her job title, but she's like the interface between, the principal interface between the Episcopal Church and the Church Pension Group. Really nice lady. She was here last year. We got to have supper with her. And they were talking about abandoning divestment. Now, you may have heard of that in South Africa at an apartheid government. And lots of people were saying, well, we got to divest from all of the South African businesses, the stocks or bonds which we might hold. So that's being abandoned. And instead, something like shareholder advocacy is being promoted. Where shareholders can say, hey, we've got money in your mutual fund, and we really care about this and that. And a lot of them are responding because we're customers telling the business what the customers want, as opposed to just getting angry and divesting. And they're coming up with new mutual funds as well for various types of social investment screening. One of them has a human rights screen. I thought that was just an interesting movement, but it turns out to be working better. Last thing, Cuba came back.
Yay.
What do I mean by that? In 1966, the House of Bishops, probably against canons, this was probably unconstitutional, decided to make the Diocese of Cuba, which had been part of the Episcopal Church, an independent Anglican diocese. In other words, they disinvited them from this denomination. It was 1966. Done very casually after supper. I've read the notes, the minutes from that meeting. I was just